Empires left behind monuments, laws, and ledgers, but these dry records contain the closest thing we have to a voice from the past. Today we trace how slavery worked in 20 different polities, the paperwork that regulated bondage, the lists that scheduled labor, and the houses that sheltered lives forced into service. This is not myth-making. It is evidence-driven history. Let us begin. In the Roman Empire, freedom was a legal status that could be written into stone. Roman law permitted enslaved individuals to be freed through formal acts of manumission, a process that granted them the status of liberti or freedmen. While this conferred a form of limited citizenship, it did not erase their past. Freedmen remained socially and economically bound to their former owners, who became their patrons. This relationship, known as patrocinium, created a complex social hierarchy where legal freedom coexisted with enduring obligations. Inscriptions on tombs and public monuments often record these acts of manumission, preserving the names and stories of those who transitioned from property to personhood, yet never fully escaped the shadow of their former bondage. Their lives illustrate how a legal change in status was only the first step in a much longer journey towards social autonomy. Across the Aegean, the fabric of everyday Greek life depended on unfree labor. Within the oikos, or household, enslaved workers performed a vast range of duties essential for the functioning of society, from domestic service and childcare to skilled crafts and agricultural production. Unlike the large-scale plantation systems of later eras, Greek slavery was often integrated directly into the family unit, blurring the lines between labor and personal relationships. While manumission was possible, it was not as systematically codified as in Rome. Instead, freedom was often granted on an individual basis, with the act sometimes recorded in temple inscriptions where the freed person was dedicated to a deity. These records provide a fleeting but powerful glimpse into moments of emancipation within a system that was fundamental to the economic and social structure of the ancient Greek world. In the Eastern Roman Empire, or Byzantium, bondage was meticulously regulated by law. Building on Roman legal traditions, Byzantine codes like the Corpus Juris Civilis of Justinian I provided a comprehensive framework governing the sale, punishment, and manumission of enslaved people. These laws treated slaves as property but also acknowledged their humanity, setting conditions under which they could be freed and outlining the legal responsibilities of their owners. Court practices and legal documents from this period reveal a system where the state actively managed the institution of slavery. The legalistic approach of the Byzantines demonstrates an attempt to control and rationalize human bondage, embedding it within the bureaucratic machinery of the empire, while simultaneously defining the narrow pathways through which an individual could legally exit a state of servitude. Centuries later, the stories of the enslaved in the Ottoman Empire often survived in the meticulous pages of court ledgers. Islamic court registers, or sicils, documented a wide array of legal matters, including slave sales, disputes over ownership, and acts of manumission. These records are invaluable because they frequently contain personal details, names, origins, physical descriptions, and even brief testimonies that humanize individuals otherwise rendered anonymous by their status. The courts served as a venue where enslaved people could, on rare occasions, seek legal recourse or have their freedom formally recognized. These documents offer a granular view of slavery as it was practiced on the ground, revealing the complex interactions between law, commerce, and the lived experiences of enslaved men and women within one of history's most powerful empires. In many parts of the Islamic world, freedom could be an act of profound religious charity. The concept of freeing an enslaved person was considered a meritorious deed in Islamic ethics, and this principle was institutionalized through legal and financial mechanisms. Pious individuals sometimes established religious endowments or with a specific purpose of purchasing and emancipating enslaved people. This practice embedded manumission within a framework of communal piety and social welfare. By transforming the act of freeing a slave into a structured, charitable enterprise, these societies created a systematic pathway to freedom that was motivated by faith but executed through established legal and economic instruments, reflecting a culture where spiritual virtue and social justice were deeply intertwined. Within the brutal economy of the Caribbean sugar colonies, enslaved people were listed beside livestock and tools in plantation inventories. These chillingly pragmatic documents were created for accounting, sale, or inheritance, and they cataloged human beings by age, gender, skill, and monetary value. An enslaved blacksmith might be valued far higher than a field hand, and a young woman of childbearing age was assessed for her potential to produce more enslaved laborers. These records reveal the cold calculus of plantation management, where human life was systematically dehumanized and monetized. They stand as stark evidence of how the logic of capital transformed individuals into assets, their identities reduced to entries on a ledger that measured their worth purely in terms of labor and profit. On the plantations of the American South, every day was scheduled with rigorous precision. Worklists and ration logs were essential tools of control, dictating the daily tasks, hours of labor, and sustenance for every enslaved person. These documents regulated the pace of work from sunrise to sunset, assigning specific gangs to planting, hoeing, or harvesting, and meticulously tracking productivity. The distribution of food and clothing was similarly controlled, used as a mechanism to reward compliance or punish perceived insubordination. These records offer a stark window into the micromanagement of human lives, demonstrating how plantation owners imposed a rigid, industrial-style discipline upon an agricultural labor force to maximize output and enforce absolute authority. They are testaments to a system designed to extract maximum labor while stripping away individual autonomy. In colonial Brazil, slavery was not confined to rural plantations. It thrived in the bustling streets of cities like Salvador and Rio de Janeiro. In these urban environments, enslaved people performed a wide array of jobs. They worked as skilled artisans, construction laborers, porters, market vendors, and domestic servants. Many were part of a system known as ganho, where they were permitted to find their own work and earn wages, but were required to remit a significant portion of their earnings to their owners. This arrangement provided a degree of mobility and economic activity not typically seen in rural slavery, but it did not alter their fundamental status as property. Urban slavery in Brazil highlights the adaptability of the institution, showing how it could be integrated into diverse economic settings while maintaining its core principles of exploitation and control. Across West Africa, slavery took many local forms, long before the transatlantic trade began. In many societies, internal systems of bondage were deeply integrated into social, political, and economic life. Enslaved individuals were acquired through warfare, debt, or as punishment for crimes. Their roles varied widely. Some were incorporated into households almost as family members. Others worked in agriculture, served in royal courts, or even became soldiers. Unlike the chattel slavery of the Americas, these indigenous systems often included established paths to assimilation or freedom over generations. An enslaved person's descendants might eventually become full members of the community. This diversity of practice underscores that slavery was not a monolithic institution, but a complex set of social relations that differed significantly from one culture to another. In the face of systemic oppression, freedom was sometimes seized through defiant acts of resistance. Across the Americas, escaped enslaved people formed independent settlements known as maroon communities, or quilombos in Brazil and palenques in Spanish colonies. These communities, often established in remote and defensible areas like mountains or swamps, became symbols of Black resistance and autonomy. The most famous, the Quilombo dos Palmares in Brazil, survived for nearly a century, developing its own social structure, political leadership, and defense systems. These settlements actively resisted colonial control, launching raids on plantations and negotiating their survival on their own terms. They represent a powerful counter-narrative to the totality of enslavement, demonstrating that enslaved people were not passive victims but active agents who fought to create their own free societies. In the Aztec world, not all forms of slavery were permanent or hereditary. The status of a tlacotli, the Nahuatl term for a slave, was fundamentally different from the chattel slavery of later European empires. Individuals could enter this state of bondage for a variety of reasons, most commonly as a form of payment for debt, as punishment for a crime like theft, or by selling themselves or a family member into servitude during times of famine. Critically, this status was not passed to their children, who were born free. Furthermore, tlacotin had certain legal rights. They could marry, own property, and even own other slaves. Manumission was legally possible through various means, including having their debt paid by another. This system of debt bondage illustrates a form of unfree labor that was conditional and often temporary. The vast Inca Empire was built on a foundation of meticulously organized labor, not currency. The state operated a system of obligatory service known as the meta, which required communities to provide a quota of laborers for a set period each year. These laborers built the empire's extensive road network, constructed temples and fortresses, worked in state-owned mines, and cultivated agricultural lands. While not slavery in the chattel sense, the meta was a form of coercive state-managed labor that mobilized millions of people for imperial projects. This system allowed the Inca to achieve incredible feats of engineering and administration without a market economy, but it was based on the subjugation of conquered peoples and the extraction of their work for the benefit of the ruling elite. Within the walled courtyards of elite households in imperial China, servitude was a fixture of domestic life. Bondservants, known as nubi, occupied a status distinct from that of free commoners. Their condition was often hereditary, and their lives were recorded not in public ledgers but in private family registers and local government documents. These individuals performed all manner of household labor, from cooking and cleaning to serving as personal attendants. While their treatment varied greatly depending on the household, their legal status was unambiguous. They were the property of their master's family. Their existence, confined behind courtyard walls and documented in private records, reveals a form of bondage that was deeply embedded in the patriarchal and hierarchical structure of traditional Chinese society. In feudal Japan, labor and social stigma were inextricably linked. Certain marginalized groups, historically referred to as burakumin, were relegated to occupations considered impure, such as leatherworking, butchery, and undertaking. Though not technically enslaved, their status was hereditary, and they faced severe social discrimination and spatial segregation, forced to live in separate hamlets. This system created a hereditary caste of laborers who performed essential services for the broader society but were ostracized for it. Their condition blurs the line between slavery and caste, representing a form of social bondage where inherited identity, rather than legal ownership, dictated one's work and place in the world. Viking society was powered by raids that supplied a constant source of unfree labor. Enslaved people, known as thralls, were a fundamental part of the Norse social structure, occupying the lowest rung below free farmers and the warrior aristocracy. Captured in raids across Europe, from the British Isles to the Slavic lands, thralls performed the hard labor on farms and in households, allowing their owners the freedom to engage in trade, exploration, and warfare. Their status as property was recognized in Norse law codes, which detailed their value and the punishments for harming or killing them. The presence of thralls was essential to the Viking economy, enabling the expansion and voyages that defined the era. Within the opulent confines of the Ottoman Topkapi Palace, power depended on a unique system of controlled service. The palace was staffed by a large population of enslaved individuals, many of whom were captives of war or were purchased as children from regions like the Caucasus and the Balkans. These slaves were not engaged in manual labor but were trained for highly specialized roles within the imperial administration, the military, or the sultan's personal household. Men could rise to become powerful officials or janissaries, while women in the harem could gain immense influence as mothers or consorts of the sultan. Despite their potential for power, their status remained legally unfree, their lives and fortunes entirely dependent on the will of the sultan. This system of elite slavery was a core mechanism for consolidating and maintaining imperial authority. In imperial Russia, freedom was tied directly to the land. Millions of peasants were legally bound to the estates of the nobility as serfs. This system, which was formally codified in the 17th century, restricted their movement, dictated their labor, and subjected them to the authority of the landowner. Serfs could be bought, sold, or traded, sometimes with land and sometimes without, in a manner that closely paralleled chattel slavery. Their labor supported the wealth and lifestyle of the Russian aristocracy. Though legally distinct from slavery, the lived experience of serfdom, with its lack of mobility, forced labor, and personal subjugation, represented one of the most extensive and enduring systems of bound labor in modern history. For centuries, great empires were connected by slave routes that crisscrossed the Mediterranean Sea and the Sahara Desert. These vast networks facilitated the forced movement of millions of people. Viking longships carried captives from Ireland to Scandinavia, while Barbary corsairs raided European coastlines for slaves to sell in North African markets. Across the Sahara, caravans transported enslaved Africans to the cities of the Middle East and the Ottoman Empire. These trade routes were the arteries of a global economy in human beings, linking diverse empires in a shared commerce of violence and exploitation. The maps of these routes trace the paths of immense suffering, but also demonstrate the interconnectedness of world economies long before the modern era. The formal abolition of slavery in the 19th century did not end coercive labor. In many places, it simply changed its form. In the aftermath of emancipation, colonial powers like Britain and France implemented systems of indentured servitude to replace the labor of the formerly enslaved on plantations in the Caribbean, Mauritius, and elsewhere. Millions of laborers, primarily from India and China, were recruited under contracts that bound them to work for a fixed number of years in exchange for passage and meager wages. While legally framed as a contract between free individuals, the reality of indenture often involved deception, abysmal working conditions, and brutal enforcement, maintaining the core practices of coercive labor under a new legal guise. Where written records fall silent, the ground itself remembers. The archaeology of slave living quarters on plantations and in urban settings provides direct physical evidence of the lives of the enslaved. Excavations of cabins and cellars have unearthed personal belongings, handmade tools, and food remains that offer profound insights into aspects of life absent from the official documents of owners. The discovery of carefully buried spiritual objects speaks to the persistence of African cultural and religious practices. Analysis of animal bones and pottery fragments can reconstruct diets and reveal the efforts of enslaved people to supplement their meager rations. These material remains are a powerful testament to the resilience, creativity, and humanity of people who lived under dehumanizing conditions. Across time and place, systems of unfreedom took many forms: legal deeds, military impressment, household servitude, and coerced labor on plantations. Examining registers, inventories, and the archaeology of quarters helps us tell the human stories often erased by empire. If you found this investigation valuable, subscribe for more evidence-based history. Share which archive or record surprised you most in the comments. We'll follow the most requested lead in a future episode. Thank you for watching.